Hi, I'm Katie Rushmer and welcome to the #AdStudents podcast. Each week I will be joined by Billy Little and Henry Brown to discuss different topics in advertising and marketing, so make sure to tune in.
Hi, thank you to everyone who's tuning in right now. My name is Katie Rushmer and I'm currently here with Billy Little.
Hello, I am a man.
And Henry Brown.
Howdy, I am not a cowboy.
So guys, let's get stuck into this. So anyway, let's just sort of jump into it. So we're talking about obviously issues in advertising and should companies align themselves with values that they apparently hold, whether they do it well or they don't do it well, whether they do it once a year, for example, like the Pride pinkwashing kind of deal going on. So yeah, what do you guys think about this?
I think whether a brand aligns themselves with issues depends on different viewpoints and perspectives. I think from an ethical perspective, one could argue that brands should perhaps align themselves to issues within their marketing, but also it's important to consider the risks of things like consumer backlash and, accusations of inauthenticity. Henry, what do you think?
Honestly, I really agree with you on treading a very careful tightrope of staying authentic. I think if companies are going to align themselves with certain issues, then they have to have at least some relevance to the actual industry or the market of the company. Otherwise it just seems very out of the blue.
Yeah, definitely. I agree, because it's kind of sort of going back to the whole pinkwashing thing. A lot of companies hadn't previously shown any support of the LGBTQ community. And I think the issue that advertisers have for this kind of thing is that they want to show their support. They want to show their support for their employees. And obviously Pride Month is a great time for them to do that, because it's sort of a time to celebrate the liberation and remember the Stonewall riots and all of that. But at the same time, if they're only doing it for 1 month a year, are they really part of that issue? Are they really sort of sticking to that?
Well, that's the classic example, isn't it? And the classic question. A lot of companies are being accused of just being diverse and aligning themselves to issues such as LGBT representation just to penetrate new markets. And
yeah, exactly.
There's a lot of risk involved in that. I mean, take the M&S Pride Sandwich 2019 campaign. Well, I knew we were all going to talk about that at some point, but that received a load of backlash because it received allegations of being an unrelated box-ticking exercise. But if you look at other campaigns, such as AdStudents' Kiss with Pride 2017 campaign, which donated £1 to charity, Stonewall charity, every time somebody used their Snapchat filter, that got tons of praise. So I think, going to what I was saying earlier, there's definitely a need for authenticity and not just talking the talk, but also walking the talk.
Walking the walk. Going back to Absolute Vodka, they have always had the messages of promoting the LGBTQ community. There's actually a whole bit on their website that I remember looking at and reading through, and them saying how they've always supported those kind of ideals, and it's sort of now they're really able to push it because it's obviously a more socially acceptable thing to do. Obviously, there was a time where sort of LGBTQ either was completely taboo or illegal, which is insane to think about now with the world that we live in.
I think as well what you're saying about Absolute, we mentioned that they've got a history of kind of promoting the LGBT community. I think,
and sort of sticking with them and being an ally.
Yeah. I think that's how you can really tell the difference between a company that actually cares and one that, I don't know, does a rainbow flavoured drink for a month. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can really tell who's doing it just because, this will make the people on Twitter think that we look good.
Yeah, exactly. And it's sort of obviously they want to show their corporate social responsibility. Obviously there are employees within the organisation who are part of the LGBTQ plus community. And it's a very delicate balance that advertisers need to find, because they can't promote every cause all year round, because that's virtually impossible, as much as they'd like to.
But should they?
But at the same time, I think they should to the best of their ability, but obviously, how can they decide what cause is better than another cause, that why they should choose one over another? But I guess they kind of already have that issue anyway. Most organisations do have a yearly chosen charity. Some have the same charity for years on years. But it's just kind of difficult for them to stick with sort of one or more, because it's impossible to do every charity, because there's thousands, if not millions, around the world that they could be promoting or could be sticking up for.
I suppose another question linking to what you've just said, though, is, with should brands align themselves to issues? I think a lot of it depends on the products. I put a post up on LinkedIn a few weeks ago about Skittles. They do an annual Pride packaging campaign where they remove the rainbow from their packaging. At the end of the day, they're just sweets. What really do they have that's aligned to LGBT representation?
Look, it's very much like a low investment product, isn't it?
Yeah, their tagline is something like because only one rainbow matters or something. But it kind of like the rest of the year round, they've got their Skittles are still the rest of the colours of the rainbow. So the rest of the year round, like, does it not matter as much? Is that like
maybe they're just saying that theirs is the only rainbow that matters?
No, that's
a hot take and a half.
I'm pretty sure that's not the message that Skittles want to get across. Oh no, that would be awful. But sort of going away from the whole like pink pink washing thing. It's the same with sort of like eco awareness and environmental and sustainability, because obviously that's had like a massive push in the last few years, definitely, with like anti-plastic campaigns going out, things about sort of like energy sustainability. For example, I think one of our lecturers in one of our classes, I can't remember for the life of me what the magazine was called and what the company was called. It might have been BP actually, but they released a magazine in the UK and a magazine in the US or Canada, and they had the one in the UK, I believe, had sort of like what they're promoting for sustainability, and it had like all the wind farms that they're erecting and the everything that they're trying to do for sustainable energy in local areas. And then another magazine on the same day that was released for the same company was promoting sort of like the new oil rig or something like that.
In one country they were promoting a certain value, and in another they were preaching against it.
Yeah, so sort of like one was sort of like, oh look, we can make so much more money from this, and then the other one was like, look how sustainable we are. But it was released on the same day in different countries, but some people in offices around the world receive both magazines because they have to, because they review that kind of thing. So like you have two completely contrasting messages sort of like sat down on your desk in front of you about two completely different things. And it's kind of like, if a company wants to promote sustainability, it should do that all around and not say, oh look, we've got a new oil rig, or we've got like we found a new source of oil or fossil fuel, essentially. I just want to make it clear, I'm not entirely sure what the company was or what magazine it was and what countries they were released in. I'm literally just picking this from my memory from something one of the lecturers said.
But no, like I remember the one you're on about, yeah.
Yeah, you're probably there. But yeah, it's very, very interesting take on things. But at the same time, it's sort of like it's showing how they're promoting sustainability to try and almost cover up the thing that people don't necessarily want to know about, or they don't want people to know about because they don't want people rioting against them or boycotting them.
I mean, here's a hot take. Would you think that, like, instead of like trying to conceal like what they're doing, do you think it's more that they're trying to appeal to different audiences with different values?
I think that's definitely true to an extent, because obviously there are people in sort of like the corporate world that sort of like are very heavily profit focused. I say people, but there are organisations, whole organisations that are more profit focused rather than people focused or environmentally focused. And I think it's, like I said before, it's very difficult for advertisers to try and find that balance in between their different audience, between their stakeholders and the people who work for them, who are also stakeholders, but who values what more? What does the company value? If the company says it's values something, they should probably make that very clear, and they should probably make it sort of almost part of their whole ethos, sort of like from the way that they work. So sort of trying to think of an example now. So if they're promoting sustainability and they are a company that can afford to do so, why don't they have sort of like solar panels to run their computers, or their own little mini wind farm or something like that, to try and sort of like keep everything running in their building? I don't know, I'm probably going a bit off topic here.
No, like, I see what you're saying. I think, I know it's a weird one, because as you said, like, the companies, if they like support like a certain stance, then you're saying that they should embrace it fully. If they embrace it as as like a large part of their like kind of corporate culture and identity, that doesn't really align with the kind of cultural like norms of certain countries. That might balance that might damage their sales. Do you think that's maybe why they have like regional kind of focuses?
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that. Advertisers and companies should sort of do things to a regional level, but at the same time, if it's two very, very different messages, so saying we're all about sustainability, oh no, look, we're not being sustainable at all, but we're making profit from it. Sort of like those two very different stances, two very conflicting messages, like that's not on brand. That's not keeping a brand message like all around. I think it's obviously very difficult to keep one brand message across like globally, but at the same time, you have to, as you said, keep it to a local level, keep it in touch with the people that are there. A great example will always be McDonald's first opening up in India and selling beef burgers. And then they obviously had to completely change their menu because obviously cows are sacred. And so no one wanted to eat beef in where they opened up in India.
That's got to be the worst oversight ever.
Yeah, I think advertisers and organisations as a whole are a lot more aware now of how they can and how they should keep things very, as you said, to a local level, and also their corporate social responsibility. If one country promotes sustainability more than another, yeah, sure, that makes complete sense to go down the sustainability route to get people on your side and to sort of like target your audience properly. But at the same time, you can't just roll out one big campaign for sustainability if you put it somewhere and people are going to be like, oh, well, we don't really care about that.
We don't really like trees here.
Personally, I'm not sure why people would, but I'm sure that some people out there do.
I say no, it stems down again to that whole idea then that brands should only align themselves to issues if they're truly authentic and practicing what they're preaching. Because,
exactly.
Again, another example, we all remember the Pepsi's Live for Now 2017 campaign that tried associating Pepsi with tackling social issues such as social injustice and racism, and that received huge backlash, and before anyone like the ASA could even investigate it, was pulled because of social media backlash. It hones down to that whole brands perhaps should only align themselves to issues if they're truly authentic and represent that issue within their brand values. And again, I think that also links to the whole idea then is there greater risk from a business perspective for brands aligning themselves to issues, And would they be more sensible to perhaps remain neutral and not align themselves to issues? What do you think? Does the risk outweigh the benefits?
I would say it does, like especially in the case of the Pepsi ad. I mean, even though it is like completely notorious at this point for a ham-fisted promotion of like social and racial inequalities in America, I would say the amount of publicity that Pepsi got out of that is completely worth it.
That's a really good point, actually, because sort of going back to the 2018 Iceland Christmas advert. I think it's 2018, maybe 2017. The Iceland Christmas advert of the orangutan, and it was actually the Greenpeace advert, and they knew that it would get taken down, so they didn't actually send it to run, and they knew that it would be banned, so they put out all the information saying it's banned, even though it never actually ran in the first place. So everyone thought, oh, there's this banned Iceland ad, I'm going to go have a look at that, because why was it banned? It was banned for political reasons, because obviously it was initially a Greenpeace advert, and Greenpeace are seen as a political organisation. And, like, they got a lot more publicity out of it not running and saying it was banned, and people searching it up and, like, actively seeking it out to look at it and watch it, rather than if they had put it out and it had just been banned anyway. It didn't even get to run on the TV or anything, because they knew that it would have been stopped.
But is all publicity good? Because although some companies have bad publicity, I've got a statistic here for the Pepsi 2017 campaign that after the launch of the campaign, their purchase consideration dropped by 44%. People were 44% less likely to purchase those Pepsi cans. So although they had a lot of media attention, there is a statistic here that says actually people were less likely to purchase. So I'm going to counter-argue what you've already said. And it is all publicity good publicity.
I agree. That's kind of like sort of arguing against the whole point of there's no such thing as bad publicity, because it's still publicity. But in that case, it was bad publicity, because essentially Pepsi still lost profit from it. Like, people actively decided not to buy their product.
But then I suppose it depends on what the issue is.
Yeah.
Because in the case of the Iceland one, it's an issue that a lot of people feel passionate towards, but it's not necessarily one that is perhaps going to cause as much harm to Iceland.
True.
As something associated with Black Lives Matter movements and stuff. Perhaps. I'm not saying it is, but perhaps that's another reason. So,
but they did align with it. Oh, sorry. What were you saying?
That's fine. I think it depends on what the issue is, just as much as you know what it is they're saying. Yeah,
I think Iceland definitely did correctly. Maybe correctly is a very strong word. Did at least sort of enthusiastically align themselves with the issue when they did release that advert, because they took the products out of their stores that had palm oil in it. I think it was only the own brand products that they removed that had palm oil in it, but I'm not entirely sure. But like they actively promoted that, saying like, we're against the the cutting down of the rainforests for palm oil, so we're removing those products from our stores. It's a good way for them to sort of show, yes, we're promoting this issue, but we're also doing something about it. Like, they're almost boycotting the product.
But I think still on this campaign, I know it's a couple of years out of date, back in 2018, but it also shows the role that other organisations and bodies have in supposedly banning an ad. I don't think that the palm oil ad was actually banned. It was just prohibited by Clearcast. The ASA didn't actually have any say in it because they don't really do they don't really dive into political ads. It's normally external bodies. So it also shows the role that both, stakeholders such as consumers have in having a voice on whether something is controversial, but it also shows the role of other bodies such as Clearcast, which is the approval body for broadcast advertising, and the rules put in place by legislation such as the Gambling Act 2005. So there are tons of things that marketers and advertisers need to consider when aligning themselves with issues to avoid controversy and potential significant backlash depending on what the issue is that they're controversially.
But would you say that by going with controversy, or whether or not like it works, can be a good way to get to increase brand recall?
Oh, 100%. But I think that there's an increased need for a sensitivity surrounding what the issue is that they're aligning themselves with. It's the whole idea, again, should brands align themselves with taboos or should they touch on taboos? Well, I think, yes, they should, as long as it's not something that's going to generate serious, widespread harm and offence, because advertisers have a social responsibility to, yes, drive meaningful change, but not encourage anything that could hurt people or harm people. So I think, yes, they should, but it depends on what the issue is.
Well, it depends on what the their agenda is. If it's like to genuinely like try and support something, as opposed to, oh yeah, this is a very controversial, we'll get a few extra 1,000 retweets on this.
Yeah, I mean, if it's seen as a genuine attempt to drive societal change and make some actual societal progress, I think go all for it, full steam ahead. But if it's something that's likely going to be seen as disingenuous or seen to just, cause controversy for the sake of media attention and brand publicity, I don't think they should.
Yeah.
I think it's dishonest and it's unethical, and advertisers and advertising as a whole industry already struggles with, a lot of consumers not trusting the content that they're coming out and saying. So we do have a responsibility to be as honest and as transparent as we can. So there's always that to consider as well.
Exactly. And going back to sort of like the whole pinkwashing Pride Month sort of issue with that, with sort of like companies temporarily taking on the pride flag on their products or saying we're supporting this, it's sort of some companies they're putting the pride flag and sort of like spreading awareness, but they're not supporting any charities. They're not actively playing a role in trying to help the LGBTQ plus community, and it's sort of like there's a bit of an argument around it as to whether that's a good thing or not, because if companies are taking on the pride flag, it's sort of like it shows a normalization of it. It shows that people it is becoming a lot more normal in society and people are more aware and more accepting of the LGBTQ plus community, but at the same time it's sort of like it's losing its initial message. Like, a lot of people don't know that Pride Month is about the Stonewall riots, and about everything that happened behind that, and sort of like it's to celebrate the people that were involved with that. A lot of people don't actually know what Pride Month is about. They just think it's a bit of a festival to obviously celebrate the LGBTQ plus community, but they don't actually know the history behind it. And I'm not entirely sure if brands know that, because as I said before, some brands don't even support charities, etc., of the LGBTQ plus community.
Well, I think some companies see it as a commercial opportunity. Primark got some backlash in 2017, and they had a whole Pride range clothing collection, and none of the profits went to anything to support LGBT causes or anything, and they got tons of backlash for it. But I do think that there's also a need for great care in understanding that aligning with issues shouldn't primarily be for commercial gain. I think if you're going to align yourself to an issue, there needs to be a genuine passion towards the issue, because it's just not right. From an ethical standpoint, it's not right to gain profit from exploiting minority groups and causes, because it's just not right, is it? Yeah.
And although M&S got backlash for their LGBTQ sandwich, actually no, it was just an LGBT sandwich that it was, because it was lettuce,
there was
guacamole,
no
bacon and tomato. So it was essentially a BLT with guacamole in it.
I mean, I'm not really sure what bacon represents for bisexuals, but...
Yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about that.
How do they add the plus into the sandwich?
No, I did mayonnaise maybe. But the thing is, it's like, even though that sandwich got a lot of backlash from it, a lot of people were like, we don't need our own sandwich. We need accurate representation and support. They did still give some of the profits to a charity from that. But as you said, Billy, Primark got full profit out of it. They didn't actually... and it's sort of like the fine line between whether you're supporting and spreading awareness, or whether you're spreading awareness and just saying that you're spreading awareness and that it's a good thing that you're spreading awareness anyway, so you don't really need to do the rest of it. But yeah, sort of like the line between whether they're supporting, like actively supporting, whether they're getting involved in the community, donating money to charities, where they've got community initiatives and things like that, and whether they're just putting a pride flag on a product to say, look, we're part of this.
But it's not just in LGBT. You've got stuff like fair trade logos. They're supporting a cause, or organic food, organic sourcing, fair trade. Do you think that people are just born to be offended? So supporting these issues and raising these issues, are people just being too offended by companies raising these issues and aligning themselves with these issues, and so we just let them go ahead and do it?
To be honest, I think no matter what anyone ever does, there will always be someone in the world that is offended by it or doesn't like it to some respect. Obviously, if it's widespread offence, then it's probably something that's a bit more serious. Could it be considered more serious because more people are offended by it? Obviously that's a real grey area to sort of go into for that, because it's a very interesting point that you brought up there, Billy.
But the reason why I brought that question up earlier about are we just being too offended is because of the Money Supermarket's 2017 Epic Squads campaign with Dave. We all know Dave, the fellow who is bald and wears high heels and has a gorgeous buttocks, I might say. But yeah, that received 895 official complaints to the ASA on the grounds of harm and offence and for homo prejudice and conveying all homosexual men as effeminate. With the company then arguing that actually they were trying to just be funny, lighten the mood, and also embrace everybody in diversity. So do you think people are just born to be offended? Because personally, I love that campaign.
Yeah, I agree. I love that campaign. It so the fact that people have said that it's what was the term that you used? Homo prejudice, or
the word in the word was homo prejudice. I came across that.
Yeah.
I didn't form it myself.
So I slightly disagree that it's something to do with that, because the advert doesn't specifically point out that Dave in the Money Supermarket advert is homosexual. That might just be his style. That might just be what he wants to wear, and I think people should accept that and let him be. Let him wear his booty shorts and high heels with his suit.
I said that's just the way he walks. He's been walking like that since he was 2 years old.
Yeah.
First day of school, 9-inch stilettos.
Exactly. If that's what he wants to wear, that's what he should wear.
It's what I was going to wear to graduation.
The fact that the advert doesn't specifically say that he's homosexual, he could not be homosexual. I don't think that particular advert breaches harm and offence. Did it get upheld or not upheld from the ASA?
It didn't get upheld, despite formal investigation. They considered it would not generate widespread harm and offence, and I agree with them there, to be perfectly honest. It ranked as I think, don't quote me, but I think it was ranked number 1 for the top 10 most controversial ads. Complained about ads, to the ASA in 2017. And also Money Supermarket, if you look on the most complained ads, Money Supermarket is quite often on there in the top 1 to 3. But I don't think they're causing any widespread harm and offence. But 895 people believed it did. So there's clearly
Blimey.
a need for caution. But Did you think that would have? Do you think that ad really harmed their brand?
No, I don't think it harmed their brand. I think a lot of people liked that advert, at least from my perspective. At the time when the advert came out, a lot of people were talking about it, and a lot of people thought it was funny and actually quite uplifting.
Yeah, like more people were talking about it from like a basis of like, oh, it's very like a physical comedy.
Yeah, and sort of like an empowerment, almost like an empowerment kind of advert, sort of like, yeah, like you go, you strut your stuff, Dave.
Yeah, like you do you.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, like, with that in mind though, like, do you think that some people do just get offended, like far too easily regarding ads like these?
I think some people find, or at least there can be misinformation around these kind of things. So someone can watch an advert and think, oh, I didn't like that, and take it completely the wrong way, and sort of almost maybe find others that think the same thing. And it can sort of have that effect. It can have sort of the audience getting the wrong message from a campaign or an advert.
Yeah.
That the organisation initially expected to put out or intended to get across to their audience. But at the same time, that's what things like concept testing should be for, because they should always test what the outcome of their product or campaign is going to be. Yeah, I do think there's always something is always going to offend someone. Like, there is no perfect, unoffensive advert out there that could exist.
I suppose you also have to think that it wouldn't be an issue if someone wasn't going to get offended, because if everybody all supported it, it wouldn't be an issue.
Yeah, like, I think it's whether or not their offence is actually like grounded by something. Or whether it's because someone interprets an advert that like attacks their race or gender.
Well, to be fair, on the ASA guidelines, it does say widespread offence. Widespread offence or harm, or potential widespread offence or harm, which I think is sort of like the key aspect there. I think the ASA are very aware that they can't monitor everything, and that people will always be offended by something, whether it's a colour scheme.
I suppose there's a degree of subjectivity then. Yeah,
exactly. Adverts are very, very open to subjectivity.
Yeah.
Are you drinking honey?
I've got a mild case of tonsillitis, so...
Is that honey or golden syrup?
It's honey.
It's honey.
Oh, God.
Okay, anyway, so I do think context is really important, sort of around like advertisements and everything like that. For example, if there's a riot going on about a certain topic and then an advert loosely covers something that's in that topic or what that riot's about, that could have massive backlash. Even if that advert is planned before said riot, it could still be a bad time to release it, because obviously it's something that's going to affect people, it's something that's topical, it's something that's happening now. So obviously we've covered quite a few topics, whether brands should align themselves with the issues or not. But we've talked about a couple of campaigns to do with that. I guess the main question is, what do you two think? Should brands align themselves with the issues that they promote, they represent?
My stance on this is that it depends on what perspective you want to take. From a completely ethical perspective, then one could say that yes, brands should align themselves to issues, because advertising has a wider responsibility of joining meaningful societal change and progress, and representing diverse people. But then I could also argue that from a business perspective, whilst you could increase salience and brand attention and stuff, there's also significant risk of stakeholder backlash. So there is an increased need for a sensitivity when aligning yourselves to issues, and a need for authenticity. Otherwise, you're going to be perceived as disingenuous or dishonest. That is my answer. Ding! Oosh!
Henry, what about you?
My interpretation of it, it's kind of a morally grey area. Like, I'm not saying that brands should align with certain issues, because that makes it seem like it's mandatory, doesn't it?
And that would sort of set a precedent for sort of all brands to align with everything.
Yeah, like that kind of devalues the brands that actually do. But at the same time, I'm not saying don't align with certain causes, because obviously, like if you're a purely profit-driven business, then you're not going to have the best kind of reputation among audiences, are you? So I would say the companies should align with certain causes, provided there's some sort of correlation between the cause and their audiences.
Yeah.
Whether or not there's some sort of overlap.
Yeah. I agree with that. Personally, taking quite an ethical standpoint, I do think that brands should align themselves with certain issues. So it shouldn't just be sort of like a one time a year gimmick for them. But at the same time, I also do believe there is a bit of a grey area. So if there's sort of like a massive almost event in a year coming up, like Pride Month or like Comic Relief, for example, a lot of organisations jump on that, but it is essentially sort of, they do it once a year. But at the same time, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, because you're still promoting awareness, you're still giving to charities, but the companies that gain profit from it but are only spreading awareness and not necessarily supporting those issues, I do think that is wrong. I do think that brands should do something to support the cause. But yeah, I do think there is a little bit of a grey area, and I do think it's very hard for advertisers when they know a certain thing is happening or their audience is interested in something, and it's not necessarily already deep within their brand. I do think it's hard for advertisers to try and get that kind of thing across to their audiences. Definitely a very hard task to get it right and to not get massive backlash for example, making an LGBT sandwich. On that note, it's time to wrap up. Thank you to everyone who tuned in and made it to the end. Goodbye from me, Katie.
Goodbye from me, Henry.
And a goodbye from me, Billy.
We hope you're all staying safe and well in this very unusual time, and look forward to our next week's episode. Thank you.
Don't forget to stay tuned for next week, where we'll be discussing a new topic for debate. If you have any opinions or questions that you would like us to discuss, feel free to put them in the comments, and see you soon.